MCC to introduce the rest of the board. We have Vice Chair Brent Miller, Heather Hookman, Robin Gilbertson, Lauren Bagler, and Katie Hoffman. Along with our administration superintendent, Mr. Joe Meyer, and over there is Jake Scandrick. Patrick couldn't be with us, he's at a conference. We appreciate all of you who chose to attend tonight, here and online, as we further explore our options for the next school year in our efforts to help balance our budget. No matter each of our personal opinions, we appreciate you being here and being engaged in our community, school, and its future, and most importantly, our students. We fully realize the weight of these decisions on our students, families, staff, and others associated with MCC and our community. The thought of change is always difficult, but especially when it could be a major change from our normal that we have known for decades. As a board, we are proud of our school with caring administrators, staff, and support staff that work every day to make sure our students get the best possible education. We also have a school and community that have been committed to helping families fill in the gaps where needs are identified. And we will stay committed to trying to do that no matter what way moving forward looks like. We want to reiterate that no decisions have been made at this time. Our choices are probably not the ones we would ever have chosen for our school and our students if we had plenty of other options. These meetings have been intended to inform our community of what our options are right now and what they potentially will look like. We are depending on your feedback through comments and survey results, conversations, emails, etc., to help give us an idea of how our stakeholders are feeling. We realize that any decision made will not make everyone happy, and that it will be a hard pill to swallow for each of us. All families in our district have different situations and circumstances on a day-to-day basis that don't lead to any one of our options standing out as the clear best option. And that is difficult for us as a board also. We ask that your comments stay constructive. We fully acknowledge that change can be hard and emotional, and we hope to have dialogue tonight that will help us move forward with a decision. We do value opinions, concerns, and questions that each of you have. Please also know that internal operations of our school are not kept secret, but also not fully and widely known or understood, just as others may not fully understand all that is involved with each of your jobs. There are a lot of tasks done and responsibilities carried by each staff member that are usually invisible in our entire school community. And we can make some decisions that are made potentially confusing or frustrating. We encourage you to keep asking questions as we all are more than happy to answer to the best we are able. Mr. Meyer has put together some good information tonight based on all of our options for the next year and to address some of the comments and questions that have been posted since the last meeting. Thank you all for coming.
You can shut it off. Thank you, Tony. As Tony said, I have, this isn't going to be the same information, and a lot of the slides will be based upon a lot of the feedback that was received to try to answer some questions that were posed in the survey. So as we go through, kind of backing up before we start talking about the 4-day school week, I want to talk a little bit about the state of the district financially. And I mentioned this at the last public meeting. There's over 100 schools across the state, both large and small, that are in the same spot that we are in, spending reserve funds to cover costs. And having these budget reduction meetings. If you follow the news or the newspapers at all, it's out there. Our expenditures in FY24 and our budget for this year, FY25, both were and are projected to be more than the revenues that we have coming in. And we're now in the stages of planning for FY26, next school year, 25-26, and the budgeting around that. And we need to balance that budget to stop the spend from our general reserve amounts. This is when the district will deficit spend when we have those expenditures greater than the revenues. The board policy is 20% of our fund to maintain that, and we are at 18.5% after our last audit. And that equals $1.6 million. That's our cushion amount where we have to spend when things are outside of the budget. Our preliminary FY26 numbers show that we need to reduce about $350,000 if all things stay the same with enrollment, staffing, and expenses, with 3% increase and a 2% increase on revenue. So that is kind of a hard thing to judge, especially in these times when inflationary costs are just out of whack. It's hard to even know sometimes what those increases are. And one example of that I mentioned at the last meeting was our property liability insurance increasing $40,000. And that was the lowest bid that we could get in. So why are we facing these budget deficits? There's four critical reasons and four main reasons. Declining enrollment, the inflationary costs, the unfunded or underfunded state mandates that we receive from the state, and the state per pupil aid on the formula not keeping up with inflation. We're $1,356 per student behind inflation over the last 20 years. We are still financially okay, but we will not be if we continue to deficit spend. We're being proactive now to avoid any dire financial situation like statutory operating debt, which is a minus 2.5% fund balance. There's 13 school districts in the state this year that are in SOD, and 23 projected for next year. When that happens, the state comes in and kind of revamps everything and puts you on a plan to get you out, and they kind of make those cuts for you, which we don't have a lot of say in. That's why we're being proactive. As far as declining enrollment goes, I have a slide showing our numbers over the last several years, but our high point in the last 10 years was 730 average daily membership in 17-18, and our low point was in 23-24 at 685. And I'll show this in a slide in a little bit so you can see those numbers. Our projection for this year is 700, and you might ask, well, why is it a projection when we're already in session? Because the state takes your numbers at the end of the year. It's the average daily membership, because we have kids that come and go, leave, move in, and then they take those numbers at the end of the year. The unfunded mandates, I want to really talk about this as far as what some of those things are. So there were 60 new education mandates alone in the last funding year, which was the 23-24 session. Unemployment for summer hourly workers, so our hourly workers now are eligible for unemployment. In that first summer, the summer of 23, it was $65,000. Now the state funded that, but that money now is out, it's ran out. In last summer, it was 77,000 or 78,000, and we're projecting for the summer of '25, $80,000 that we will have to take on because that funding stream that MDE provided us, one-time dollars, is running out. So funding to schools from the legislature comes with many limitations that are earmarked dollars that have to be spent on items that are universal free meals. That's another unfunded mandate. The REDACT initiative that we have to implement. They funded that, but not enough. That's an underfunded mandate. Earned safe and sick time benefit. And the cost for the new Minnesota paid family leave that goes into effect in January of 2026. Our biggest shortfall, as I stated earlier, comes with the declining enrollment over the last few years, and that's a loss of revenue, while other costs continue to rise and increase on the expenditure side. We're also now dealing with the unknowns of the federal government and the potential changes that are occurring there around the Department of Ed on the federal side, and the future of funding districts that receive that we receive on the federal side of dollars. So our fund balance, what we're talking about is our general fund, and these are unreserved dollars, unreserved funds. And in the general fund, the most common or the most dollars that are used out of that pay our general operating costs, the costs that operate our school. And most of that, 70% of that, is salaries and benefits for our employees. There's also purchasing of equipment, textbooks, and things like that that come out of the general fund. Then we have food service and community service, are two other big funds that we receive that have to be spent out of those silos of money. So, as I said, inside the general fund, there's also restricted funds that can only be used based on the state requirements. These cannot be transferred from any other account into the general fund. You can always transfer money from the general fund to those other accounts, but not to not out of those restricted accounts into the general. Some of these include student activities, staff development, scholarships, capital projects, literacy, gifted and talented, school library aid, safe schools, long-term facility maintenance, student support personnel, just to name a few of those restricted areas that we have to keep that money in those funds. I've heard a lot of comments about, well, if we wouldn't have built the new addition in 2019, we wouldn't have this financial situation. That's a totally separate account that was voted on. It is a building bond. That's a separate account. Same thing with the gym floor that was put in 2 summers ago. That's a long-term facility maintenance fund, along with donations, generous donations from community. Totally separate account. It's not out of the general fund. So have a little bit better understanding about that. Hopefully can answer some of those questions. So as I said, in the general fund, Fund 1, our expenditures for FY25, 70% of our general fund is made up of line 1 and 2, the salaries and benefits. 21% is under the purchase services. Those are businesses or contracted services that we contract out for whatever service that might be. And then our supplies and materials, capital, and other to make up our general fund. Again, these are the day-to-day operations of the school district. So here are the numbers, and you can see our high point there at 730 in 17-18, and where we're at in 24-25 on our student enrollment. And the total is our total number of school employees. So the left is our licensed staff, and the second column is our non-licensed staff. So licensed staff would be anybody that is required to have a license to do their job. Teachers, administrators, those are the big ones. And then our non-licensed staff would be anybody else that is an hourly worker or is working in the district that doesn't require a license. And you can see we've made reductions over those years. Most of the time it goes unnoticed to the public. That's done through attrition with retirements or possibly through non-renewals. But we're at 113 total employees this year. So now getting into where we're at with options and some solutions to balance the budget. As Tony said, to my knowledge, there's been no decisions made at all around this. The school board discussed options regarding our initial fiscal year 26 budget reductions that we knew we had to do for 25-26. And that happened at the December 24, this last December, the December meeting. And we had a whole list of options of ways that we can cut the budget. We received feedback from all of our staff members on ideas and ways that we could reduce the budget. One of those was the 4-day school week as an option. Questions about what is it? I gave information on the information that I had at that time, what we knew. Had further discussions around that, and as a result of that meeting, it was decided that we wanted to pursue that a little bit further. So the board gave me the directive to explore that further, get more information, and then poll our staff on their feelings. And that's kind of where we were, the information that we provided at the last meeting on what led to the expansion and the further discovery and research around the 4-day school week. This option requires input from all stakeholders. That's a requirement from the Department of Education. And so that's where we're at, gathering input and feedback around the pros and the cons to see if it's even an option for MCC. And if the board decides that it is not an option, then we'll go a different direction. They decide it is an option based upon the feedback that is required, then we'll continue to move forward. So what are those options? Well, it comes down to reducing expenditures or increasing revenue. And on the reducing expenditures, it's been narrowed down basically to two different options. The 4-day school week, along with some other cuts that have to be made because it wouldn't be enough to get to our goal of 350, or cutting staff and programming, and that would be obviously more staff and more programming than in option 1. Increasing revenue, there's 2 ways to do that. You get more students, or you increase the local taxes, and kind of lumped into that would be a consolidation with another school district, which brings in more students. So that's kind of lumped into the first bullet. So the option around the 4-day school week and cutting staff, there's the numbers. It would be 2 equivalence of 2 FTEs. So that could be 4 half-times or 2 full-time, but the equivalent of 2 FTE, depending on what the positions are, who the people are, what the programs are. Hourly staff, that hourly reduction would be the hourly staff that would not have to be here when the students are not here. Sub costs, that's on a conservative side. If there's 29 days where a teacher or a paraprofessional would not be in school, where a sub wouldn't be needed for them that day. Utilities and food, and then transportation is the big one. If there was 29 days of less travel and fuel, that's the largest reduction on a 4-day week option. So some hourly staff would be reduced on the hours because, like I said, they wouldn't need to be here on those student days. Sub costs would be cut. Wouldn't need a sub on those days for the teachers, paras, and even the cooks. And then utility savings on energy and water, and food costs that we wouldn't have to purchase for those days. The other option, if the 4-day school week was not an option for us, would be a reduction in staff and programs. It would be the equivalence of 5 to 6 full-time employees, depending again on the positions. And that's going to make up that cost, along with some other fringe things in programming and activities and that type of thing, but not as much as that the staffing would be. There would be a cut to some electives or programs and activities. This results in larger class sizes, which would be approximately 24 to 30 in 2-section classes in the junior high and high school. We have some of those already. We have some classes that are between 25 to 30 in 2 sections. We also have some 2-section classes in the elementary when we've made some reductions over the last few years. For those of you that have a 5th or 6th grader, we went to the departmentalized model there where there's basically 2 sections in each of those classes, where we used to be a full 3-section school all the way across. One thing the board has been very adamant about that we want to try to maintain is smaller class sizes in our primary grades, K1, 2, and 3. Those are critical in the reading development and literacy, and trying to keep those as minimal as we can as far as increasing in the class sizes. So 4, 5, and 6 is the grades that would probably see an increase if that was if those cuts were made at that school. And one thing I want to reiterate too is whatever cuts are made, those duties don't go away. Larger class sizes, you're going to be teaching more students, having more papers to correct and planning. If it's on an administrative side, those administrative duties don't go away. Somebody has to do them. I can go down the list, whatever it is, those duties are still there and have to be completed. Teacher recruitment and retention is also a concern, and we'll get into some of the major concerns, but could be jeopardized there as well with larger class sizes and everything that goes with that. Increasing revenue, adding more students. We can do that through open enrollment or having people move here, or people having more kids. Our family sizes are not what they used to be. But we receive $7,281 per student in state aid. That's what our aid is this year. We don't know what it's going to be next year. There's usually some type of increase, but who knows with the state legislature, they're not even working to solve those problems that they have currently. But currently we have 118 open enroll in and 165 open enroll out. Those are pretty steady numbers, except in the students that are choosing to do online courses as a choice. And then we've seen homeschool increase ever since COVID. We saw a really high spike right during COVID and right after, and then it came down a little bit. One other misconception that I wanted to clear up is that we do not receive any funding for homeschool students. We have to provide services to them if they so choose, but there's no funding that goes with that. If they want to come in and get our textbooks for all of our classes, we have to provide that for them. And then the other thing is paying for transportation for students that choose to go to a private school. And the example that we have that's close to us is Southwest Christian. If we have a family or a student that lives in our district, we have to pay to get them to the district boundaries. So we'd have to provide from their home to the district line, and then they go from there to Edgerton. So most of our private school is going there that we have to pay for, and then also most of our open enrollment is from the Chandler area and south. And part of that goes back to when we had Chandler Christian as a school. They would go there till through grade school, and then they would transition over to Southwest Christian. A lot of that's out of convenience for where they live. As big as our district is, we have 7 other school districts that touch our borders, and the outskirts are sometimes more convenient just in proximity. Also, the option of adding more students through consolidation with another district. Currently, there is no interest from FOLDA in discussing consolidation. I've talked to their superintendent on 2 separate occasions since we've started this discussion. I've also talked to a school board member. That doesn't mean that there might not be talks later on, but right now they're in the middle of the election of their own on a building bond referendum. And at this point in time, they're not interested. And there's no other feasible options for consolidations with the other school districts in proximity. One thing that I encourage you to do is, I guess when they get to work up in St. Paul, but contact your legislators and tell them what's happening. Tell them your story. I think sometimes it's easier and better coming from constituents than it is from school district leaders. We've gone up there the last several years, and it falls on deaf ears. Even the crying out for additional help on the problems that we're seeing. And sometimes we do get kind of left in the dust out here in outstate, and it's always about Metro. The other option on increasing revenue is increasing local taxes. There's an option with an operating referendum, which we currently have one, that expires in 2030, which is the election year of November 2029. So the earliest that we could have a referendum, an operating referendum, because again of state law, is in November of 2025, this next year. So that would be on taxes payable in 26, so we wouldn't receive any of those funds until school year 26-27. These are not hard, fast numbers, but approximates through our finance company, Ehlers. It would be approximately $225 a year on a $150,000 home, $375 a year on a $250,000 home, and that's again market value. And that would be for an additional $400,000 a year on top of what we already have in a tax for the school district. For ag land, that on an operating referendum, ag land is not taxed, but you would be taxed on your home, garage, and 1 acre, just like other residential. Capital levies is taxed on your farm land, and we have a capital levy as well, which expires in 2035. So 4-day week concerns. These are the big ones that we've heard, that we've received in feedback through the survey or comments. So less student contact time and the concern about student outcomes. Increased cost to families for the 29 days, whether that's in daycare or food costs, childcare, practices on the off days, a loss of income for hourly staff and transportation, food for at-risk students, and then moving off the block schedule to a traditional 8-period day has also been a major concern. So when we're talking about the student contact time and student outcomes, I have a slide later that we can address some of those statistics on that. But there's options too to add additional time, which would equate to about 5 days. The thing with that, we'd have to fit that into the calendar somewhere at the end, so we'd be going to school past, into June, that first week of June. The increased cost to families, those are real concerns. I have a separate slide on that as well. Some of that could be solved or resolved around the Chetek environmental learning option that Katie Chapman talked about at our last public meeting, and she's tried to give a little bit more information on that too, and has things, if they would progress further, if that was an option, she's ready to move on that and have that ready. Practices on the off days, these times would be set times. I think there was a little bit of misconception that off day is going to be a full day of practices and games. That wasn't the intent, and that was not the message that wanted to be sent, but they would be in a general sense at the same practice time as what they would on those other 4 days, just to keep the consistency. There might be a game schedule. We wouldn't. The purpose of talking about that was that it's not going to be affected like it would on the school weekdays. So this is where, and again, all of these, as Tony mentioned earlier, nobody likes any of these as far as ways to cut or ways to save money, but that's where the savings would come from in a lot of those areas. So child care, it's a legitimate concern for those that need care. The extra costs with limited options for child care. There's 29 total days off for students compared to this year. And we talked about that potential solution again with Chetek Environmental. Also partnerships with students that we might be able to provide a student contact list for those that would be willing to babysit. As of this morning, there was 43 on the survey, there was 43 that said they would need childcare like the Chautauqua Environmental, and 66 maybes. So concerns around the 5 to 6 staff cuts, obviously the larger class sizes, concern about student outcomes and how larger class sizes are going to be affecting student outcomes. Some elective classes would be eliminated or would have to be scaled back. And then the duties of the cut staff still having to be completed. And then obviously the loss of the jobs for those that are cut or reduced in hours. 24 to 30, like I said, with the required, for required classes in the class sizes. There's going to be less one-to-one interaction with the teachers. Some opportunities will be eliminated or reduced with our elective courses or extracurricular activities. Duties of those reduced that still have to be accomplished and picked up by someone. And this is where those savings would be if we went to this option. So the 4-day school week, and this is a repeat from before, what's it look like on a calendar. The most widely used day in Minnesota and across the country to be off is Monday, some Friday. We had heard some suggestions about possibly Wednesday, and looking at that was something that we've never heard from or heard about, but looked at it, and the problem with the Wednesday is, from a staff standpoint, is having the kids for 2 days and then off a day, and then having school again 2 days, the consistency. And then we wouldn't be able to utilize those holidays that are on Mondays, like Labor Day, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Memorial Day. So we'd capture those days already that are no school days. Again, late starts and early outs would be eliminated for students, and pretty much that calendar would be 4 days. The Mondays that would not be off would be MEA week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, the Good Friday before Easter. We'd go to school on that Monday. So the length of the school day would be 30 minutes per day added for the students. That's 5 minutes at the start and 25 at the end. Student day would be primarily Tuesday through Friday, with student instruction time from 8 to 3:30. Students would have 1,054 hours. That's 148 days, unless hours or days were added to that. 1,020 are required. I have another slide to reiterate or to show that comparison. And that cushion, which is the amount of hours that we have above and beyond what the state requires, it has to be in there for our snow days or late start days or early out days due to weather. So there are the state law requirements on the number of student contact hours. We have to have 850 hours for kindergarten, 935 for grades 1 through 6, and 1,020 for grades 7 through 12. The middle section there shows you what we currently have for hours and what the proposed 4-day calendar would have in 1,054. There's a concern about loss of that contact time. It would be about 5 days is what that would be. So if that would be added on, then that would take care of to get to where we are currently. But again, the number of hours that are required by the state were far above those. So the teachers, the length of the day for the teachers would increase by 1 hour. So they'd be here 8.5 hours inclusive of lunch, currently 7.5 hours. we heard or read many comments about teachers would be working less and getting paid the same. They'd be working the same amount of hours. One other thing I wanted to clear up as far as some misconception, this was not a teacher-driven idea around the 4-day school week. I'm very proud of the staff that we have and the work that they do. There's a lot of things that people don't understand what they do on a day-to-day basis, and we should be proud of our staff that we have here. Teachers would have one Monday per month for training, meetings, and professional learning. So that would be on that off day. Teachers would be here working that 8.5 hours. And then, as I stated earlier, they'd be working the same number of hours as they are this year. What is the impact on students? So the 6 Minnesota districts that have been on a 4-day school week for a decade or more, they state that their student achievement has remained neutral. It's generally no decrease or increase. Now, are their test scores lower than ours? Yes. Are they critically low? I wouldn't be happy with them. But they haven't decreased from even before. So I have a slide on the past 4 years on their numbers and compared to where we are as well. If they do decrease, the Department of Ed would reject their renewal on their application for the next application for a 4-day school week, because student achievement is reported. It's one of those factors that the state looks at as far as the success or not success of the 4-day school week. Student and staff attendance has reportedly increased in those districts that have implemented the 4-day school week as well. So the 7 school districts that are currently on 4 days, all of them except Carlton have been doing the 4-day school week for a decade or more. One statistic, and again, focusing on the school districts that are in Minnesota, they have to do stakeholder surveys, which includes community members, parents, staff, and these are all, several of these are renewing just this year, and this is like within a week's data. But 95%, 97%, 98%, 93, 96, and 91 on satisfaction of the 4-day school week. The last column shows you, what I did was they gave me percentages on what they're saving from year to year on the 4-day school week in their budget. And that does vary from district to district. Part of that is, size, and some of it also is on what reductions they made and what staff they may have kept. Most of them have said that the positive effects that come out of the 4-day school week, where some of them did it because they were in SOD or statutory operating debt. Now it's not even about the budget savings, it's about the positive effects that it has on their community. It's a community-wide positive effect. And again, this is the statistics that we have from those school districts. Around achievement, everything above MCC here are the schools that are on the 4-day school week. And this is a 4-year average of their reading proficiency, math proficiency, and science proficiency. Hopefully you can see those in the back. But if you look at ours as a baseline, and this column is attendance rate, and attendance is measured is a measurement of the students who attend school on a regular basis and are not frequently absent. A student is considered consistently attending if they attend more than 90% of the time that the student is enrolled during the school year. That's how they figure attendance percentage. You can see that our scores are the highest of all of these. And the bottom ones are all of the districts that touch us or that border our boundaries. Carleton's scores here are when they were on a 5-day school week. The rest of these are on when they were on a 4-day school week. These are all 5-day school week schools. So in comparison, some of the schools that are on a 5-day school week have the same math and reading and science proficiency as those that are on a 4-day school week. One thing this slide shows me is the dedication that we have from our staff and the goals that we have put in place to have high achieving scores and the initiatives that we put in place. And that's one of the things that we always use as our selling point and brag about. We've been in the top 3 in Southwest Minnesota for the last 14 years for sure in math, reading, and science. And we do brag about that. The other thing I wanted to point out is, yes, 4-day school weeks could possibly affect test scores, but it's not the only factor. There's many other factors that factor into achievement scores. So although the scores in the schools that are on a 4-day week are low, they most likely were low also prior to moving to a 5-day. Otherwise, the state would have rejected their renewals moving forward. Carleton scores are on a 5-day school week because they haven't completed their first 4-day school week year. And again, many of those other scores that border us, or the districts that border us, all of them are on a 5-day school week, and some of them have the same achievement scores as those that are on a 4-day school week. On the national data, I mean, I've looked at data until it's coming out my ears, but one thing that really stood out to me on the RAND Corporation, and this kind of sums it up in a nutshell. Research is still being conducted around the 4-day school week and the impacts of that schedule. And the results thus far have been mixed, particularly for non-rural school systems. I don't think this initiative or this option works in larger schools. An analysis of student performance in Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming noted that 4-day school week students generally made less progress in reading than students who attended school 5 days a week. However, it also found little to no effect on rural students on average. And I think part of that comes with in smaller school districts, in rural school districts, we have that one-to-one interaction. We care about our kids than in larger school systems. All these other states, by the way, the majority of their schools are on a 4-day school week, so sometimes that data can be skewed that way as well. These are the other school districts that are exploring the 4-day school week. Buffalo Lake Hector submitted their application last week. The other, I think there's Mountain Iron Buell was one that was added since our last meeting. So the other 5 are in similar stages as we are right now. So just to reiterate, the process of changing to a 4-day week calendar, there has to be surveys conducted that's open to the district and all of its stakeholders. There has to be a demonstration of employee union support, a demonstration of community support after 3 public meetings. We have to submit a school board approved application to the Department of Ed. The deadline for that is April 25th. But if we would go that route, we would want to have time for planning for next year. And then receiving that approval from the Minnesota Department of Ed, which they have to respond in 45 days. So upon us, if the board would approve a written notification to MDE, a district may elect to return to a traditional calendar during year 2 or after 1 year of a 3-year approval process. So if it's not something that works, you could go back. So a timeline, again, the stakeholder surveys that is still open, it will remain open until this Friday, February 7th at noon. The results of those surveys will be posted and sent out to all of our stakeholders. Everything excluding the comments, it would take you a while to read all those, and you probably don't want to read some of those comments. But those will not be included, but those would be sent out. A report to the school board on the results of the survey. They have those, they're monitoring that as it comes in. But those results would be, they're shared at the meeting on next Monday, the February 10th meeting. And then the school board will make a decision on the approval or the denial of a 4-day-week application, whether it's going to move forward or not, at that February 10th meeting. They're not approving the 4-day school week. They would just approve, yes, we're going to move forward, or no, we're going to go another option. So if approved by the board, an application to MDE would be sent after it's completed, and the application is not completed. I've been doing some legwork on trying to have some of the preliminary stuff in there in case, so it wouldn't be a rush thing at the end, but that application is not complete. And then a final decision from the school board on the 25-26 calendar would happen at the April 14th meeting, and that would be a yearly calendar approval, whether it's a 5-day week or the 4-day week. Either way, that calendar has to be approved. Again, the resource page is still out there. Surveys will close on Friday at noon on the 7th. It's also accessible for you to go back and change your survey vote or your decision if you choose, whatever it might be. I will tell you that the board will not, they're not counting the maybes in either the yeses or the nos. So if you put maybe and you feel like I'm leaning towards no or leaning towards yes, I would encourage you to go back into the survey and put that in there so you have a better voice on this decision that's going to be made. So the yeses and the nos will be counted, the maybes will not be counted in either one of those. So at this time, I'm going to open it up for questions. The board will come up here, and if you want to address questions to the board specifically, we'll try to answer as many questions as you can. I would ask that you come to the mic so everybody can hear your question or comment. And thank you for attending and being attentive to the process. And we've got 35 minutes. Actually, no, we started at 6:30, didn't we? So I think 35 minutes, an hour and a half would be plenty of time that we can try to answer. If we get done before that, that's great. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and if anybody has questions or comments, you can sure come to the mic. Yeah, I don't think it's on.
Good evening. As we know, the school board is elected community members. They are here to establish a vision and goal for our schools, set policies, ensure accountability, as well as hold the superintendent accountable. And I just want you to know that I fully trust that each one of you has a passion for our kiddos and for this community. I don't believe that downsizing teachers should be an option. There will always be inflation, and the 4-day week seems like a temporary fix, but I understand the critical situation we're in. And I don't pretend to know everything about the budget and how things need to be divvied up. That's what you guys are for. I think as a community, we need to take a hard look at our priorities. I understand funds are used in certain ways and they can only be used for those, but sometimes it feels like we put priorities on things as a community rather than the school. As in the gym, we built a practice gym when we don't even have air conditioning in our school, in a lot of our classrooms. Do we really need 3 secretaries and payroll clerk when we only have one, school nurse for this district? Can we cut a game or two in sports or a tournament to save on transportation and other things? And I know we have a really great sports booster club, but maybe as a community we need to fundraise more for our education and just a little less for our sports. And I'm not anti-sports in any way. I'm a sports mom. I love sports. They bring a lot of benefit to our community. But I think that there has to be some hard questions. Do we raise property taxes knowing Murray County does have a below average tax rate compared to the rest of the state? A lot of our kids suffered academically during the pandemic, my kids included. So it's imperative that we do not do anything to jeopardize the education of our children. Our priority should be to education and to the health of our school and the community, or the community will suffer. It's time to make hard decisions now and plan for the future, not just next year or the year after. We need to have goals set so we don't end up in this predicament in the future. So I didn't have any particular questions, I just wanted to share my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I as well don't have any questions, just broad statements, and some of this was covered tonight, but I'm just going to emphasize it again. You cannot build a house without its foundation and structure. A shaky foundation leads to a shaky future. And what I want to emphasize is that we're going into a major decision without the proper foundation first. This decision impacts too many lives to not have the proper foundations in place first, and we need to lay out that groundwork before a decision can be made. First off, we're in a soon-to-be, if not already, child care crisis in Murray County. We're not only on our way to losing our only non-in-home child care facility, but there is at least 4 in-home daycare providers at retirement age as well. We need to have the groundwork laid first for proper child care options before we can pass a 4-day school week. I'm going to add a little bit there. I know there are going to be kids that are off school. However, that's at a cost of more than what a child care facility is. Secondly, we have no factual data on the savings by switching to a 4-day school week. We have been presented with 2 to 3 options to help alleviate the budget deficit. Option 1 is laying off 5 to 6 staff members, resulting in a $350,000